When my landlady laughed and told me, "You couldn't handle me if you tried," I thought it was just a joke. I didn't know those words would stay with me, or that she'd become the one person I couldn't get out of my heart. I still remember the first time I met her, my landlady. I'd just moved into the building, dragging 2 battered suitcases up the narrow stairwell, when I heard heels clicking above me. A moment later, she appeared at the landing. She wasn't what I expected at all. Most people picture a landlady as distracted, businesslike, maybe even distant. But she was composed, graceful, the kind of presence that fills a space before you realize it. Her dark hair was pulled back neatly, her eyes sharp but softened by something I couldn't name. She smiled when she saw me struggling. "New tenant, I take it?" Her voice was warm, low, the kind that makes you stop for a second before answering. I nodded, half out of breath, trying not to look as flustered as I felt. "Yeah, apartment 3B. Just moved in." She leaned casually against the railing, one eyebrow arched in quiet amusement. "I'm your landlady, and you're about 2 seconds away from breaking your back on that suitcase." The way she said it wasn't unkind. It was teasing, like she already knew I'd laugh along. And I did. When she took the heavier bag from me, I caught the faint scent of her perfume, something subtle, not floral, but clean and steady, like sandalwood. It surprised me, the way such a small detail lodged itself in my chest. We walked together to the apartment, her heels clicking steadily against the old wooden floors. She unlocked the door and stepped inside before me, scanning the place as though making sure it was ready. There was something comforting about how sure she seemed, how she moved through the space like it bent to her rhythm. "This is it," she said with a little flourish, handing me the keys. "It's not perfect, but if you treat it kindly, it'll treat you kindly back. That's the secret with old places like this." I smiled, setting my things down. "Guess I'll have to learn from the expert." That was when she laughed, an unguarded, full sound that caught me off guard. It wasn't the polite laugh of a landlord trying to be friendly. It was real, the kind of laugh that slips out when someone isn't worried about who's listening. And for a reason I couldn't explain, I wanted to hear it again. As she showed me around, I found myself noticing details I shouldn't have. The way her fingers brushed against the window latch as she tested it. The way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear without breaking her rhythm. She carried herself with this effortless confidence, but I sensed something gentler underneath, as though she was used to standing tall for other people. By the time she left, I was leaning against the kitchen counter, still listening to the faint echo of her heels retreating down the hallway. I told myself it was nothing, that I was just tired, adjusting to a new place. But deep down, I knew better. From the very first moment, something about her stayed with me. It didn't take long before my landlady and I settled into an easy rhythm. She'd stop by every so often, sometimes to check if the radiator was behaving, sometimes to collect rent, sometimes just because she happened to be passing through. At least, that's what she said. One late afternoon, I was crouched by the kitchen sink, fiddling with the handle that had started to leak. I had a wrench in one hand and a look of frustration on my face when she appeared at the doorway. "You look like a man at war," she said, arms folded loosely across her chest. I laughed under my breath. "Feels like it. Whoever designed this thing clearly hated plumbers. Or tenants." She stepped closer, the corner of her mouth tugging upward. "Let me guess. You've never fixed one of these in your life, have you?" I shook my head, tightening the wrench stubbornly. "I watched a video. How hard could it be?" That's when she laughed, the sound low and warm, shaking her head. She crouched down beside me, her shoulder brushing against mine as she peered into the cabinet. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice teasing but not unkind. "You couldn't handle me if you tried. What makes you think you can handle this sink?" The words hit me like a spark. I knew she was joking, but the way she said it, the soft drawl, the way her eyes lingered on mine just a second too long, made my chest tighten. I tried to play it cool, giving her a lopsided grin. "You underestimate me. I'm more capable than I look." She tilted her head, considering me for a moment, as if weighing whether I actually believed that. Then she gave a little laugh, stood, and tapped the wrench in my hand. "Capable, maybe. But this sink isn't your opponent. It's mine. I've been dealing with stubborn things like this for years." I watched her as she leaned down, turned the handle with quick precision, and within seconds, the leak stopped. She looked up at me with a grin that carried more pride than mockery. "See? Experience wins every time." I wanted to laugh it off, but something about her earlier remark lingered. You couldn't handle me if you tried. She'd tossed it out so casually, so playfully, yet it kept replaying in my mind as if it meant more than the words themselves. She must have noticed my quiet pause, because she brushed her hands together and leaned against the counter, watching me. There was a glint in her eyes, not sharp, but curious, like she was waiting to see how I'd respond. All I managed was a smile and a quiet, "Guess I still have a lot to learn." Her lips curved into something softer, less guarded. That's not such a bad thing. And then she was gone, off to whatever business she had, leaving behind the faint scent of her perfume and the echo of her laughter. But that line, her line, stayed with me long after the sink had stopped dripping. It's funny how quickly small routines can start to feel like something more. A knock at the door here, a shared laugh there. Before long, her presence had become part of my days. One evening, I found her at the bottom of the stairwell, struggling with 2 heavy grocery bags. The sight surprised me. She always seemed so effortlessly composed. Yet there she was, pausing to shift the weight from one hand to the other, a faint crease between her brows. "Need a hand?" I called down. She looked up, and her expression softened into a smile. What gave me away? The look of defeat on my face. I jogged down to her, taking one of the bags. Our hands brushed as I did, and for a second I noticed the warmth of her skin, delicate but steady. A fleeting touch, yet it sent a quiet ripple through me. "You don't have to," she said, though she didn't pull away. "I want to," I answered, my voice steadier than I expected. We climbed the stairs side by side, her perfume mixing with the faint smell of fresh bread from one of the bags. When we reached her door, she hesitated, then gave me a look that felt half grateful, half inviting. "Come in for tea. It's the least I can do." Her kitchen was nothing extravagant, but it carried her touch, neatly kept, warm, with small details that spoke of someone who cared about making spaces feel lived in. A bowl of fruit on the counter, a stack of books by the window, a soft scarf draped over a chair. She filled the kettle and set it on the stove, moving with a kind of easy grace. I leaned against the doorway, watching as she reached up for cups from the cabinet, the hem of her blouse lifting just slightly with the motion. I forced myself to look away, though the image lingered. We sat at her small table, shoulders almost brushing as the steam curled up from our mugs. The tea was simple, but in that moment it felt like more than just tea. It was a shared pause in the quiet rhythm of the evening. She asked me about my day, my work, my plans. I answered honestly, though I found myself more interested in the way she listened. Really listened. Her eyes didn't wander, her attention didn't falter. When she looked at me, it felt like I was the only thing in the room. And in turn, I noticed things I hadn't before. The way her laughter softened when it was just the two of us, less polished and more genuine. The way her shoulders seemed to relax once she set aside the role of landlady and allowed herself to just be. At one point, she reached across the table to move the sugar bowl closer to me, her fingers grazing mine in the process. Neither of us mentioned it, but the touch lingered in my awareness long after. By the time I left that night, the memory of her kitchen stayed with me, not because of the tea or the books or even the warmth of the room itself, but because of her. And I couldn't help but wonder if she felt the same quiet shift that I did. It was late one evening when I found her out on the balcony. The hallway outside my apartment was quiet, the kind of stillness that comes only when most of the world has already settled in for the night. I'd stepped out for some air, and that's when I saw her, leaning against the railing of her own balcony, a glass of wine in her hand, her silhouette softened by the glow of the street lamps below. For a moment, I thought about leaving her to her thoughts. She looked distant, not cold, but far away, as though her mind was carrying her someplace else entirely. But she noticed me before I could turn back. "You're still awake?" she asked, her voice carrying easily through the quiet. I shrugged, offering a faint smile. "Couldn't sleep." "You." She exhaled, not quite a sigh, but close. "Same." After a pause, she tilted her head toward her balcony door. "Come on over. No point in standing there like we're strangers." So I joined her. The air was cool, with the faint scent of rain still clinging to the night. She set her glass down on the railing, wrapping her arms lightly around herself as though she were bracing against something unseen. For a while, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, looking out at the quiet street, the occasional headlights sweeping across the pavement below. Then, softly, she said, "You know, it catches me off guard sometimes. How quickly the years go." I turned to her, surprised by the shift in her tone. She wasn't teasing, wasn't putting on that confident front she always wore. She was simply honest. She kept her gaze fixed on the street. "You spend so much time being strong for everyone else. Running buildings, paying bills, handling problems as they come. And then one night you look up, and you realize half your life is already behind you." There was no bitterness in her voice, just a quiet acceptance that made my chest ache. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I just stood there, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched, letting her words hang in the cool night air. "Finally," I said, "you make it sound like that's a bad thing. But from where I'm standing, you've built a life that others lean on. That's something to be proud of." She gave a soft laugh, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're kind. Too kind, maybe." Her hand lifted, almost absently, to rest on my arm. The touch was gentle, fleeting, yet it felt deliberate, like she needed the anchor of another person just then. "I don't let many people see me like this," she admitted, her voice low. I glanced down at her hand, then back to her face. Maybe that's because most people don't take the time to look. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Her fingers lingered against my sleeve, warm through the fabric, before she finally drew her hand back. But the silence that followed wasn't heavy. It felt understood. We stood there together until the quiet became comfortable again, until the night no longer felt lonely for either of us. And in that moment, I realized something had shifted between us. She wasn't just my landlady anymore. She was someone I wanted to know, to understand, in all her strength and all her quiet vulnerability. A few days after that night on the balcony, she asked if I could help with a light fixture in her living room. Nothing complicated, just replacing a bulb that had gone out. But the ceiling was high, and she admitted she hated climbing ladders. So there I was, standing on the second-to-last rung of a slightly wobbly step ladder, stretching up toward the fixture while she steadied the base below. "You're sure this thing will hold?" I asked, tightening the bulb into place. "Of course," she replied, her hand gripping the side of the ladder. "It's been here longer than either of us, though I don't trust your balance half as much." I chuckled, shaking my head. "You have so little faith in me." The words had barely left my mouth when the ladder shifted, just slightly, but enough to send my stomach lurching. Before I could react, her hands shot out, gripping firmly at my waist to steady me. The world seemed to pause. Her fingers pressed against my sides, strong yet trembling just enough to betray the adrenaline of the moment. My shirt was thin, and I could feel the warmth of her palms seeping through the fabric. Her face tilted up toward me, close enough that I could see the faint glimmer of concern in her eyes, the way her lips parted as though she were about to say something but thought better of it. I swallowed hard, suddenly hyper-aware of everything. The quiet hum of the lamp on the table, the faint scent of her perfume rising with her warmth, the steadiness of her grip. "You're okay?" she asked softly, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. "Yeah," I managed, though my voice sounded rough in my own ears. "Thanks to you." Her hands didn't move right away. She held me there, as if making absolutely sure I was steady, as if letting go too soon might undo the moment. And in that lingering touch, something unspoken passed between us, something neither of us dared to name, but both of us felt. Finally, she released me, stepping back as though remembering her role in all of this. "See? Exactly why I don't trust ladders." I climbed down slowly, my pulse still racing, though not from the near fall. When my feet hit the ground, she handed me the burnt-out bulb, her fingers brushing mine with an almost deliberate slowness. "Guess I owe you one," I said, more to fill the silence than anything else. Her smile was faint, her eyes unreadable, but there was a softness there I hadn't seen before. "Maybe, or maybe you owe me for catching you." I laughed quietly, but inside, I felt something shifting. The line between us, the careful, unspoken boundary of landlady and tenant, older and younger, suddenly felt thinner than ever. And though neither of us dared to cross it out loud, our bodies had already betrayed the truth. It was a summer evening when the storm came. The air had been heavy all day, thick with humidity, the kind that makes everything feel on edge. By the time the first thunder rolled, I was already at her door, returning a book she'd lent me. "Perfect timing," she said as she let me in, glancing past my shoulder at the sudden downpour that had turned the street into a blur of silver. "Looks like you're not going anywhere for a while." I laughed, brushing the water from my hair. "Guess I'm stranded." She didn't seem to mind. Instead, she pulled a blanket from the back of the couch, spreading it over us both as we sat by the wide living room window. Outside, rain lashed against the glass, the rhythm steady and relentless. Inside, everything felt warm, cocooned in the soft glow of a single lamp. For a while, we just watched the storm. The sound filled the silence, yet it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt intimate, in a way I couldn't quite name. Her shoulder rested lightly against mine beneath the blanket. At first, I thought it was just the closeness, the necessity of sharing space. But then her hand, resting between us on the cushion, shifted just slightly until her fingers brushed against mine. I froze, not pulling away, not daring to move. Her touch was deliberate this time, soft, tentative, like testing the edge of something fragile. And then, as if making a decision, her hand settled over mine fully. My heart hammered in my chest. I turned to look at her, and she met my gaze without flinching. There was no laughter now, no teasing remark to hide behind. Just her eyes, steady and searching, as though she wanted to know if I'd pull away or if I'd stay. I stayed. The storm outside seemed to fade, replaced by the quiet thrum of connection that pulsed between us. Her fingers tightened around mine, the warmth of her palm pressing into my skin as though she needed the reassurance of the contact as much as I did. Her earlier words, "You couldn't handle me if you tried," flashed in my mind. At the time, it had been playful, almost dismissive. But now, as she held on to me with such quiet honesty, I realized even she didn't believe it anymore. Neither of us spoke. Words would have broken it, cheapened it somehow. Instead, we sat there, the blanket pulled around us, our hands entwined as the storm raged on outside. Her thumb brushed gently across my knuckle, a small, unconscious gesture that sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to say something, anything, but the moment didn't need words. It was a confession in itself. And when she finally rested her head lightly against my shoulder, I closed my eyes, letting the steadiness of her presence sink into me. No declarations, no promises, just two people, sitting together in the storm, holding on to something neither of us could deny anymore. The rain had slowed by the time night crept in, leaving the air cool and damp. The storm had passed, but we stayed where we were, on the couch, beneath the blanket, our hands still joined. It felt as though neither of us wanted to be the first to move, as though shifting might undo everything that had just unfolded in the silence. She was the one who finally broke it. Her voice was soft, almost uncertain, so different from the playful, confident tone I was used to. "You know," she murmured, eyes still fixed on the darkened window, "when I teased you that first week, told you that you couldn't handle me, I never thought you'd take me seriously." I smiled faintly, squeezing her hand. I didn't. Not at first. That earned me the smallest laugh, but it faded quickly, her gaze lowering to where our fingers were laced together. Truth is, it wasn't really a joke. It was a way of protecting myself. I thought if I kept things light, if I laughed it off, I wouldn't have to think about this. She lifted her head then, her eyes finding mine in the dim light. There was no shield left, no mask of confidence, just a woman allowing herself to be seen, completely, and without pretense. "And now?" I asked quietly. Her lips parted as if she didn't quite know how to answer. Then she gave the smallest shake of her head, a wry, almost self-conscious smile tugging at her mouth. "Now, I think I was wrong." I let go of her hand only so I could guide it gently to my chest, pressing her palm over the steady beat of my heart. "You don't have to handle me," I said. "You just have to believe that I see you. All of you." Her eyes softened, shimmering faintly in the glow of the lamp. She leaned closer, her forehead brushing against my temple, and for a long moment we simply breathed together, her warmth against me, the quiet rhythm of her presence filling the space where words weren't enough. She sighed then, not the weary kind I'd heard on the balcony that night, but one of release. "I don't know what this is supposed to look like," she admitted. "I don't know if it makes sense, or if it ever will." I turned slightly, so her cheek rested fully against me, her breath warm against my neck. "Maybe it doesn't have to make sense," I whispered. "Maybe it just has to be real." Her arm slipped around me then, pulling me closer. The embrace was gentle, unhurried, but full of meaning, like she was giving me a piece of herself she hadn't shared in years. I held her just as tightly, letting the quiet stretch out, knowing that nothing more needed to be said. When she finally pulled back, there was a new softness in her smile. Not the playful landlady's grin I'd first known, but something deeper, something just for me. And for the first time, her laughter wasn't a shield. It was an invitation. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe for more slow burn romances. And if you'd like to hear another age gap love story, let me know in the comments. I read every one. 5.